So I wanted this video to be a really nice recap on the autonomic nervous system, everything that we have spoken about in that week number 2, and to really dive into what this looks like for you and what happens when your body does. So I want to just do a really nice little recap on the polyvagal theory, on the 3 states of the autonomic nervous system, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, what animal we turn into, all of those things, so that we can continually gain an understanding of what's happening inside, outside, and in between. So when we were speaking on the polyvagal theory, one of the things to understand our autonomic nervous system is really understanding what's called or coined the term neuroception. Now, neuroception was coined by Dr. Stephen Porges, who of course brought the polyvagal theory to the world. And it's basically nervous system awareness. So it's having awareness of what is happening around us, inside our bodies, outside our bodies, as in within our environment, places we go, people who are around us, the weather, things happening in our external environment. And then of course, with other people, and that's in between, really tuning into how other people make us feel and what our body does around other people. And of course, asking ourselves if those people are serving us. What does our body do? Is it safe? Is it unsafe? That's all going to play a huge role in the effect of our autonomic nervous system, and again, our self-talk and what our body does moving forward. So everything was covered off into that in the second video. But in this work, it's just continuous awareness. Lots of topics I will rehash and talk about, so that we're hearing it again and again and again, so we can become so familiar, really getting to know when our bodies are bumped. And that's what we're trying to do. We can't maintain a state of equanimity and balance 24/7, and we wouldn't want to. Our bodies are designed to move in and out of stress, and the 3 main states of the polyvagal theory of our autonomic nervous system, of course, our ventral vagal state, being our safe state, right? Our spinal sympathetic state or mobilized state, and then also our dorsal vagal state, known as freeze, or also known as fawn. They are needed and necessary for certain things that unfold in our environment, and we need them for survival. But as a reminder, we absolutely cannot live there. So it's about recognizing when we move into these states, understanding again what our body does, physically, mentally, emotionally, and then doing our best the quickest we can to climb back up the ladder to return ourselves back to our ventral state. So that's what we're going to explore today in this video, and also in your notes moving forward, because everyone is different, right? Everyone's going to have a different physiological effect. Everyone's going to have a different emotional effect, and your body is going to do different things when you move into your fight flight state, otherwise known as like my hyena state, right? Or it will do different things when you move down into freeze or fawn, that I call my turtle state, right? So we're going to kind of really dive into what it looks like in our self-talk, what happens inside and outside, and also, we start to gain a bit of an understanding of why our body doesn't heal. These conversations are moving a little bit further towards also now unpacking what happens in our brain, right? Why we keep doing the same kind of things, why we keep repeating the same behaviors, also why we keep saying the same dialogue to ourselves. So in the next couple of videos, we start to really unpack the triune brain. And we understand that what happens when our nervous system is living in a chronic state of fight flight or a chronic state of freeze or fawn, okay, both dysfunctional states of the nervous system, both survival states, meaning that our bodies are not healing there, we're not burning body fat, we're also not able to heal in that space, right, because the body thinks it's being chased by a tiger. We really can start to gain an understanding of what it looks like for us and what we need to do to, again, bring ourselves back to our ventral state, which is the only place we can change neural pathways. So if we want to, ultimately, if we want to change what's going on in our behaviors, okay, then it must come from a present ventral state. If our nervous system is living in these chronic states of stress or chronic state of shutdown, there is absolutely no way that we are going to be able to change those neural pathways to create a different experience, right? We're just going to be kind of like Groundhog Day. We're just going to be on repeat. Okay, so in today's video, we're just going to be exploring, as I said, like what those 3 states really look like, feel like, and sound like. And you'll have that in your worksheets moving forward. As well. But I also want to really go through a few things that happen like within our digestive system, you know, where our self-talk goes, like what kind of words are we saying to ourselves when we tip into stress? What type of words are we saying to ourselves when we tip into our freeze or fawn state? And we're going to just really investigate that, because that's the kicker. If we can recognize that we are looking in the mirror to ourselves and we are judging ourselves, or we are finding a part of our body to criticize, that's actually putting our body into a state of stress, right? Let's break this down a little bit more while we're talking about it. So for nearly 30 years, I, of course, used to look into the mirror myself. I went through nearly 30 years of disordered eating, and I would be on repeat. Every morning I would wake up, and the first thing that I would do after looking at, of course, certain images and things like that, and, you know, in back when I was unwell, it was like, you know, magazines or whatever it might have been, or maybe on like an old like IBM computer, on, you know, things like that, where we were definitely you know, showing certain images. Especially when I grew up in the 90s, it was all about the waif look, right? So I would see these whatever you want to call it, models, you know, influencers, so to speak, that showed a body that was presented in a way that it was like, if you don't look like this, then you're not okay. Now, I'm not going to go into my backstory. All of that is in my book, Watch Your Language, but I didn't have the tools back then to know how to do it differently, right? So for 30 years, I gave a lot of power to the belief that I wasn't enough, I wasn't worthy, I needed to look a certain way. So every morning when I got up, as I said, I would fill my brain with images and things that I would have on my wall, or things that I would see in and around me. And then I would look in the mirror. Firstly, I would weigh myself, and I would look in the mirror, and the numbers reflected back to me were never ever enough. I was constantly chasing. I was constantly looking for perfection. I was constantly after the need for more. I would, you know, look in that mirror and I would pull myself apart. I would sometimes be in front of that mirror for like an hour, maybe even longer. And I would talk to myself in a way that I look back on it now, and I'm just like, it was full of hatred. It was full of judgment. It was so critical and unkind. In that 30-year period, I don't think I said a kind word to myself about my body. And my brain got so used to that dialogue, again, of I'm not enough, or I need to look like this, or when I hit that kilo goal, I'll be happy then. And the I'll be happy thens became what I knew. So my body and my brain got exceptionally used to living that way. We have to remember that our body, our vehicle, is it doesn't know right from wrong. It just learns what we teach it, okay? And when we're talking about the brain, which is not in this conversation, but it's important to know that if I do a certain thing, of course, day in and day out, what I'm doing is I'm firing and wiring certain synaptic connections together that eventually cause and create synaptic clusters. Okay, these neural pathways are like roots. So every time that I have a thought about myself and my body, right? Every time I look in the mirror, every time I walk past the shop window, every time I look on a social media feed, every time I I see someone in the gym and I compare myself, I have the same thought of I'm not enough, I need to do more, right? And that is creating a very, very strong cluster of neurons in my brain, right? That then it teaches my body to behave according to what I have learned, right? So every time something unfolds in my environment that reminds me of feeling that way or seeing these images, or reminds me of the belief that I've created in my head, the story, which is just a story, it's not the truth, then that cluster of neural pathways lights up, and straight away I then do the behavior that is linked to those neural pathways. Okay, so I hope that all made sense, because this is kind of what we're going to start to work towards, right? We really want to, in all of this work, what we're trying to do here is to create, we're not trying to give that those neural pathways that are, full of judgment or comparison, or whether it be shame or guilt or blame or whatever it might be. We don't want to light those up anymore. What we want to start to do is we want to start to create new neural pathways, right? Which is really hard. It's like training for a marathon, okay? If we have not done that before, like what I did, again, for 30 years, I didn't know what it was like to be kind to myself, to love my body, to accept my body for what it was. I had no idea. So it was like completely learning a new skill. It's difficult and it's hard, and the body wants to go back to what it knows. So again, remembering that our body, this vehicle, is just going off what it's been taught. Okay, so if we think of it that way, then we can kind of have a bit of reprieve and be like, oh yeah, so with a little bit of practice and repetition and consistency, I can actually start to light up and fire and wire new neural pathways that can actually see my body differently. And that's what we need to do. But the only place that that can happen is from a regulated state in our nervous system, okay? The only place that we can fire and wire those new neural pathways to create a different experience in our world, okay? To see our bodies differently, that's what we're trying to do here, is to make sure that we recognize when our nervous system has been bumped, okay? If we're living in that chronic state of stress or that chronic state of freeze, right, or shutdown, there's no way that your nervous system will let your body create new neural pathways from that space. We have to return our bodies back to ventral, and that's where we can access our prefrontal cortex to be able to choose again, right? And this is kind of what we're going to talk about today, all right? So when we dive into the autonomic nervous system, as per the notes in week number 2, we have a very basic understanding that it's very much like a ladder hierarchy, okay? So the nervous system, as I said, is here to protect us. It's like our little, personal security guard. When we are faced with a threat in our environment, okay, like a real threat, of course, what's going to happen very, very quickly is our nervous system, from our body to our brain, it's about 80% from the body, right, through the vagus nerve, which we'll discuss a bit later, back down to the brain, communicates together to go, is this a threat? Is this life-threatening? Do I need to fight or flee? Or is it too much for me to handle, and do I need to go into shutdown and freeze? Okay, and that's going to depend on the event. All right. So I guess for an example, when we look at a very real experience unfolding, and let's talk about driving a car. If we are in that car and there's a lot of traffic, and basically what happens, we might not have been concentrating a lot and we nearly go through a red light, okay? We brake suddenly and we stop, and the body has gone into that big rush of adrenaline, which we feel, okay? The heart rate goes up, the blood pressure goes up, the adrenaline goes up and the cortisol goes up, and we feel it. We're like, oh, like up here. And it looks like this. So like the traps come up around the ears. This is cranial nerve 11. That's our armor. That comes up around the ears. We become tense. The fascia inside of the body, the fascia and the connective tissue, they all lock up because the situation, again, could have been life-threatening, but it wasn't. So we sit at the traffic lights. We do some breathing. We calm down. 5 or 10 minutes later, if everything was okay, your body should have returned back to ventral state after that. But let's rehash the situation a little bit here. If that situation was different and we were distracted and we didn't brake the car, okay, and we go through a red light, then there's consequences to that, of course, meaning that we may be involved in an accident, okay? So the body still does the same thing. It goes from this ventral state where we're relatively relaxed into fight flight. The armor comes on, the body goes into an immobilized state, right? Because we've just gone through the red light. This all happens like that. It's so quick, okay? Blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up, adrenaline goes up, cortisol goes up. But then there is impact with another car, okay? And that's the moment, or just before that moment, when the body actually goes completely into dorsal vagal, okay? Which is the, it's part of our parasympathetic nervous system, right? Which I'll explain in a moment. Right? Which means that the body is immobilized with fear. Okay. So what happens is all of this drops off. The body becomes loose and flaccid, which means that if we are on impact with something, it means we're actually not going to hurt ourselves, right? So instead of the body being in tension when the impact happens, the body actually goes really loose, right? And we have our best chance of survival because the body has actually dropped down into dorsal, right? The body is just surviving here. So blood pressure goes down, heart rate goes down, adrenaline goes down, and cortisol goes down, right? So that the body can actually survive that traumatic experience, okay? So yeah, the nervous system is absolutely fascinating, and that's exactly what it's used for, okay? So in understanding that, we live in a world where there is like constant distraction, okay? Our phones, of course, being the biggest one. Now, our phones are taking up to anywhere between 4 to 8 hours a day, not just off our kids, but also off our own time. And when we look at how much time we have in our day, being 24 hours and 8 of that should be sleep, that leaves us with, God, I'm never good at maths, but 16 hours, right, to spend in our day. Now, if we are choosing, okay, because it is a choice. See, I don't wear a watch for a reason, and I also don't have an iPhone. I have a very bland, dumb phone, basically, that can only receive text calls. I can't even access emails or anything on this phone because I do not want it stealing my attention from the very short time that I have here. So if we are choosing, and our kids, to give 8 hours a day, potentially, which is what it's up to, sometimes more, to a device, we have to understand that that device is training our body to be a certain way, okay? Not just physically, it's training our shoulders to be rounded. You just have to look in a shopping center to see this, right? But mentally and emotionally, what the nervous system is receiving is that you are in a closed position, right? You're in a fearful position. Look, your shoulders are rolled in, right? Your head is generally hunched and over. And generally you're sitting like in a chair, which means your hips are also closed. This communicates from the body to the brain that the nervous system is not safe and you're just holding a device. Okay, that on its own is actually going to send your nervous system, right, into a state of either fight, flight, or if you are exhausted and you are doing this 24/7, you're probably going to be living in your dorsal vagal state, which is known as freeze and shutdown, where we feel exhausted and overwhelmed, right? That's just one thing, okay? So we have to understand that the environment that we are living in 2025 is highly stressful if we want it to be. There is so many things out there that are trying to take our attention away from our intention, okay? So when saying what I just did, if I'm choosing to give my time to a phone, right, and I'm doom scrolling and I'm looking at the news, right, and I'm waking up every morning, right, lying down in bed, and I pick up my phone and I'm like scrolling through the news, scrolling through Facebook, scrolling through Instagram or TikTok, and I see stuff here that I don't want to see, then you can only imagine how the rest of my day is going to go. Now, we're going to cover this in week number 4 when we're talking about energy and, you know, what we're creating and what's coming back to us. But we have to understand that if I'm choosing to spend my day here on my phone and give my attention to my device, I have no idea of what information is going to come in, whether that's going to be toxic for my mind and my body, and how that is then going to affect the rest of my day. Okay. That's going to play a massive role, right, in the state of your autonomic nervous system, right? So we really want to make sure that we're doing things that help our nervous system stay in a ventral state, okay? As I said, with so many distractions around us and things demanding our attention, it's very easy for us to become distracted, to not sleep very well, to not move our bodies, to not eat good quality food, right? And not get outside in nature and get sunlight and grounding, go barefoot on the grass. And when we're missing out on these things, then again, our nervous system is really going to suffer. And we dive into that when we talk about the triune brain. All right. So as I mentioned before, right, we do not live in a ventral vagal state. We are definitely not designed to be present and to be in a socially engaged and relaxed state all the time. One, it would be boring. Two, we're humans and we need to grow. So we need stress to adapt. When we have stressful situations, and we always will, because again, we are always trying to chase discomfort, right? That's going to bump our nervous system into a state of spinal sympathetic or immobilized state. Right, which is great because generally we're doing something that's uncomfortable for us, or it might be new. It might be something that we are doing that involves us to shift into a little bit of fear, you know, to go, oh, this is like really unfamiliar, but it's really towards the direction that I want to go. Okay, so if I link that back to my story and somebody who went through an eating disorder for nearly 30 years, right? I had to really change the way that I saw not only my body, but also food. Okay. And I'm going to just stick on this example just for a little bit, right? Because when I look at, I guess, my scenario, having 30 years of very hardwired neural pathways that created certain behaviors, it was a lot of undoing to bring it to the point where I'm at now. Right. Yeah. So I'll stay true to my story here and what I did to help strengthen new neural pathways, but give less power or less ammo to the ones that my body knew. Right. And that was a massive practice of learning about a couple of things. One being, of course, the polyvagal theory and understanding what a huge player the nervous system was in the ability to change my thoughts. And of course, the second one was learning about Eastern medicine, which was Ayurveda. I'm so grateful for both of these teachings and the time spent in these teachings to help me really gain a better understanding of my body from the inside out. Okay. So I started to recognize over time when my body started to change, right? If my body started to go into tension, if my shoulders lifted up around my ears, if my belly started to bloat, if my skin broke out, if my breathing moved from my belly into my chest, if my traps came up, if I went into a closed position, these signs from my body were all information saying that my nervous system had been bumped from a ventral state into a spinal sympathetic state or an activated state, right? Now, in saying that, you have to remember that I also spent a lot of time in these patterns. So it was very, very rare that I actually felt safe in my body. I didn't really know what it was like to be in a ventral state. I didn't know what it was like to see gratitude. I didn't know what it was like to, as I said, be kind to my body. I saw gray outside. So everything that I saw outside was gray and dull. I almost didn't see color because I was in such a state of shutdown most of the time, or in like an anxious, agitated state. So for me, finding those gaps to start to change my brain, I had to do things physically to relax my body. And that involved doing yoga, doing movement, and actually slowing my body down to start to give myself a little bit of a pause and a moment to start to change those neural pathways, right? So to start to recognize and understand where your body goes, right? When we move into a spinal sympathetic state or a fight flight state, right? Or understand where your body goes when you move down into a freeze state or fawn state. It's really, really important that you use the tools that are in the worksheets to write down what happens when you move down the ladder, okay? So as mentioned for me before, physically, I mentioned what happened when I started to go into tension, okay? What I also noticed for me is my lower back would start to hurt. I would notice that my hands would actually curl up, my jaw would clench, I would get a headache. And bloating was probably the very first thing that I noticed, and my digestive system didn't work, right? So there were really big signs for me that my body was in a state of tension, as in a spinal sympathetic state. But if I went down the ladder further, okay, down into shame, down into guilt, down into unworthiness, down into the space where I felt overwhelmed, exhausted, and like helpless, right? My body would actually do things that were different. It would roll in and it would close. I wouldn't want to make eye contact with people. I couldn't make direct conversation. I was really soft in my talking. I was unable to speak. I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to connect with people, and I would blame myself for everything, and I would want to just disappear. Now, that was things that I wrote down. It was actually on my fridge, to be honest, so that I could understand what my body did when, okay? So that I could just firstly get to know what my physical body did, because I couldn't access the part of my brain that I needed to change. So I really needed to use my physical vehicle first. And by recognizing my body going into tension, but it wasn't a tiger, I could use the tools of breathing to let my shoulders relax, to lift my head back up, to open my heart, and physically that actually says to my nervous system, you're actually safe, right? And there's a few things that we can do with our body to communicate from the body to the brain that the nervous system it's okay, there's no threat, there's no tiger. You've just seen something on your Instagram page that has it reminded you of an experience in the past. That's all that's happening there, right? Reminded us of an old story, okay? Remember, truth, what we believe about ourselves to be true is the practice of many, many years, right, of a belief, okay? We've just given power to a belief. That's all that is. So if we want to change what we're seeing, then we need to create a new belief, okay? So it's really important to use this body as a tool, right? Your body is your like biggest superhero. It is your biggest cheerleader. It's here to help you. It is not here to hurt you. So when we can recognize these things unfolding in the physical body, we can actually be like, okay, my belly's just bloated, right? I've got a tension headache. Oh, my jaw's just locked up. My shoulders are around my ears. My hips are closing. Whatever it might be. And we can use that information to take a few exhales. So long as it's not life-threatening, you have time to breathe. It is your exhale, and again, we're going to cover this, but it is your exhale that softens your body, and it gives you a pause, 2 to 3 to 4 seconds, to witness the experience, to actually look around you and go, hang on a second, am I safe? What's here? Is it life-threatening or is it not? And then you can choose differently. And that's that firing and wiring of the new neural pathway that slowly, doesn't happen quickly, starts to create a different response in that environment, right? For example, I'd go to look in the mirror, okay? And the old me would look in the mirror and find something about my body to judge or to pull apart. The dialogue would be, well, you don't need to eat today, or stick under a certain amount of calories, or make sure you go and, punish yourself at the gym for like 2 hours. Because you've been a bad person, okay? that's the story, right? What I had to do was, when I looked in the mirror, I had to look in the mirror and be like, okay, I'm recognizing that by saying that to myself, my body is going into tension, meaning that I'm shifting into a fight flight state, meaning that if I do that, my digestion's not going to work very well, right? I'm going to struggle to burn fat anyway. I'm not going to be able to be kind to myself and have gratitude. And I'm actually going to be living in a reactive state for the rest of my day. So I could see in the mirror what my shoulders were doing, what my breath was doing, right? And by saying those words to myself and criticizing and judging myself, I could see my body go into tension. So I chose in that moment to relax the shoulders, to stay looking into the mirror, to breathe into the belly, to make sure my face was soft. And I chose words and a belief, right? That was like something I would say to somebody I love. That's what helped me the most in this process. It was like I was talking to my mum, or like I'd be talking to my dog or a small child. If they were looking in the mirror and judging themselves and pulling themselves apart, you would do anything in your power to help them feel better and to see their body differently. And that's what I had to do. So because I couldn't love myself fully in that moment, I couldn't look in the mirror and go, you're amazing. What I could choose, right, was, you're the kind of person who can be kind to yourself today. You're the kind of person who can back yourself today. You're the kind of person who follows through with things. We talk to ourselves in second person, right? So you coach yourself in that moment. Don't say something to yourself that you don't believe, right? Don't look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am amazing. And deep down you're like, I don't really believe that. That's not true, because that's going to be a bit of a mismatch of energy, which we'll cover in the week number 4, right? What's super important is it has to feel right for you, okay? But your body must come first, okay? So we need to also understand moving forward, and we're just wrapping this video up, that we also have, again, a different response when we travel further down the ladder into our dorsal vagal state, okay? So it's very, very different from our spinal sympathetic or our mobilized state. Again, the body will actually close, right? And this looks exactly like kids holding a phone sitting at a bus stop, right? So on a side note, we have to understand and recognize, as I said before, every single minute that we get in our day, we are coaching our body. We are teaching our body to be a certain way. And what we teach our body, right, is then reflected in our autonomic nervous system, which then creates certain behaviors, okay? It's so important what we train our bodies to do, because our body does not know good from bad. It just knows what we do on a repeated basis, okay? If we sit in chairs for 8 hours a day and we hold a device like this for 8 hours a day, guess what we are going to become, okay? Not only is your body going to change physically and you're going to experience like hip, knee, and back issues, right? You're also training your nervous system to think it's under threat, okay? So it's so, so important when we can start to recognize what these states look like. So if I was to travel down into a free state, and you're of course going to be different, the things that I'm going to notice physically, as I said before, I'm going to lose eye contact. I'm going to become quite painful to touch. I'm going to want to curl into a little ball, and I'm going to feel really unmotivated, heavy, and stuck. Emotionally, as I said, I'm going to be moving through things, feeling shame, feeling guilt, feeling blame, feeling unworthy, feeling dissociated, feeling numb, like not really feeling any emotion at all. I probably would be moving to a space of depression or feeling depressive thoughts, right? I would also be experiencing that really sort of dark side of helplessness. A nice timed bit of humor just there. Feeling helpless and possibly despair, okay? Again, your body will show you where it's at here, okay? So certain things will be happening in your vehicle that that you can use to recognize that you have fallen down into dorsal, okay? As mentioned, this is a state of the nervous system that is needed and necessary for direct trauma, and also for survival. But if we have fallen down into dorsal state, just due to our thoughts, a repetition of our thoughts, we've been living too much in a spinal sympathetic state, so in like a chronic state of stress, high cortisol, high adrenaline, that day in, day out is going to throw us down into a very unregulated freeze or fawn state in our dorsal vagal state, right? And that's our job to recognize where our body has landed so that we can start to climb back up the rungs, back up into ventral. And that's what we're going to be exploring next week in these conversations, because it's not about trying to stay in ventral. It's just recognizing when we have been bumped, so to speak. It's like, oh, okay, my body is, I just recognized for the last 4 hours, I'm actually in a state of tension, meaning that we are in our spinal sympathetic state, right? Meaning that we're actually telling our body that we're running from a tiger, meaning that there's no healing happening in the body. We can't change any neural pathways here. The digestive system's not going to work properly here, and you're also not going to be burning body fat here, okay? Your body's going to be storing body fat because you have just told it, even though you've lost your keys, even though you've just got a work email, even though you haven't slept very well, that your body is in a state of survival. Okay. The same thing goes when we move down into dorsal, right? When we can recognize, and it might be people telling us that, like, people go, are you okay? Like, is there anything I can do to help, right? Noticing that state of shutdown, and then using the tools that I'm going to talk about in the next video to help regulate our way back up the ladder, okay, to our safe and socially engaged state, which of course is the only place, right, where we can have gratitude. It's the only place where we can be curious, not critical. It is the only place where we can be present to make a choice. It's the only place our body heals. It's the only place where our digestive system works well. It's the only place where we receive our nutrients from our food. And it's the only place where we can access our prefrontal cortex to be able to create and rewire new neural pathways to create a different experience in our bodies. We can't change what's happening in our environment, but we can change the way we see it, right? Our bodies are our bodies, however they are. And it's our job not just to see them differently, but to see the things in our world differently too. And that includes our food. That includes the challenges that we face. That includes the moments of growth, right, that we have, There's always two ways to look at things, and we have to train our body, right, to see things from that more open, relaxed ventral state as opposed to a threatening, closed and tense state. There's a lot of talking from me. I hope you get something out of that. You'll have those worksheets also sent through to you to be able to really write down a few things. And when I do see you in person or over on the course, we can really dive into, what your body does when. So remember that your body is your biggest teacher and it tells you everything you need to know. So it's our job to start to see it as our best friend, right? As something to take care of, as something to nurture. And when things show up for us, and they will, it's our job not to judge that. It's our job not to get frustrated with that. It's our job not to get tense with it. However, ask ourselves the question, thank you, body, for showing this up for me. How can I help you? What do you need? And see how that plays a role moving forward in how we start to see our experiences.